Welcome everybody to our webinar. I'm Joseph Hillenburg. I'm the father of a pediatric heart transplant recipient. He's 12 years old, almost 13. He's actually almost about to have his 13th birthday, and he's 12 years post. So he was diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy in 2011, transplanted in early 2012 at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago, or what is now, it had a different name then, but it's now Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. That motivated me to get quite involved in transplant advocacy. I have served on the UNIS OPTN Board of Directors, and I currently have leadership roles with the American Society of Transplantation and the Scientific Registry of Transplant Recipients, and other organ failure and organ transplant related organizations. My primary role in advocacy is I am the strategy advisor for Transplant Families, which is an advocacy and research and education organization, support organization for the parents of pediatric transplant recipients, as well as the recipients themselves. We also do some partner with a lot of the provider organizations on research efforts, such as mentoring leadership skills within young recipients, and participating in an NIH study and several other research areas as well. And our mission is to unite families who have children with solid organ or bone marrow transplants by providing education, support, and inspiration. We aim to help patients and families make the most of life before, during, and after transplants. So the reason we're here is, many of us are here or watching the recording, is that I think most people that have received some sort of healthcare in the last few years have received one or more letters just like this, and probably from multiple healthcare organizations. What you see on the screen is the actual letter that I received from Change Healthcare, which is a it's a company that basically is an interchange organization. They pass data between your provider and insurance and companies and other pharmacies, etc. And so they were breached, and so this is their letter saying they found suspicious activity, and here's what you can do about it, which amounts to essentially signing up for credit monitoring, something that the presenters was speaking to shortly. And we'll also be speaking to what you can do to protect your data, and we'll provide some simple guidelines. These tips can help your providers too. So if your providers, basically whether it's a small organization or a large organization, feel free to share this with them. Share this with your friends, colleagues, etc. My personal day job is in information security. I asked the presenters to if they could present for us, because they are subject matter experts in supporting many different organizations. So that's the skill set that they bring. And a couple other things from transplant families, especially for the pediatric constituency. We do a number of other educational efforts. We have a series running right now on basically what do your healthcare labs mean? And so we had one earlier in the year on basic transplant lab values, and then we had a couple of recent ones that we posted on liver and kidney specific transplant values, and now we're about to post one on heart transplant labs. So what does BNP versus pro BNP mean, and also what do numbers like from say CareDx or Natera in terms of non-invasive rejection monitoring mean? And to that end, we have a session in January that with Natera on cell-free DNA monitoring. So basically rejection monitoring without having to do a heart biopsy. And then every April, we have a pediatric transplant conference during National Pediatric Transplant Week. This will be the last Friday in the last full week of April. So I think it's the April 26th. I might be wrong about that, but I think it's April 26th. And that's a day-long session for recipients, pediatric recipients and their families. And we're currently planning that now. And then we also have an in-person advocacy event at the American Transplant Congress or the World Transplant Congress our next one will be in in San Francisco, August of 2025. So with that said, I'd like to turn the mic over to our sponsoring organization, which is Transplant Recipients International Organization Philadelphia chapter, and their president, Bill Soloway, is with us. So,
thank you, Joseph, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this timely topic. As Joseph had mentioned, my name is Bill Soloway. I'm the president of TRIO Philadelphia, which is a chapter of Transplant Recipients International Organization. And we're a dedicated and passionate team of organ donor families, living donors, transplant recipients, transplant candidates, and anyone else interested in engaging in social support. So we became chartered in 1997 out of Pittsburgh and the famous Starzl Institute, and have served Gift of Life Donor Program, the OPO here in Philadelphia, and the Gift of Life Howie's House, which is a home away from home for transplant patients and their families, and the transplant centers in the Philadelphia area for over 27 years. So feel free to visit us on our website at triophiladelphia.org. And with that, I want to turn things over to our two presenters, Jason and Chris.
Chris, you're muted.
All right.
You're muted again.
All right. Sorry about that. Thank you all for having us. And thank you all for joining. Thank you to our partners in this presentation. I want to say that we have a fantastic topic. When we heard about this opportunity, we definitely jumped on it, and it is something that we have a lot of passion on. But it's also something, this is the first time we've actually done this from the non-enterprise perspective. So both Jason and I reached out to several engineers and got a lot of opinions and input into this. And we're pretty excited about some of the content here. But it's really, from the experts, Jason and I and our peers, we took some information discussing how to secure your digital world. So give you a little bit of introduction into both of us here. I am Chris Willis, the VP of Cybersecurity Engineering at Sayers. My area of expertise is enterprise cybersecurity, governance, and risk and compliance. Fun fact, my family and I are going to be heading out to the UK next week. My son's going to be racing at Silverstone in a Formula Ford. And so we're pretty excited about that. And we actually do participate in a lot of organizations and in the community as well, in different types of partners and stuff. So we're very excited for that and how my son's coming up in this space and in his involvement in the community. Jason, you want to give yourself an introduction?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Jason Marocchi. I'm a cybersecurity engineer here at Sayers. The areas of expertise that I play in strongly are cloud security, network security, email security, some subdomains under that, but just as an overarching theme. Thought about my fun fact, and it's going to tie in to the next couple slides we have, but at Sayers, one of our main principles is giving back to the community, and St. Jude is one of those one of the organizations that we give back to. So we had a competition internally to teams that could create the best barbecue sauce, create a marketing scheme around it. So I was actually the chef that created the award-winning barbecue sauce. So if anyone's on and has questions for modifying sauces, what you have, please let me know, reach out. Always curious.
Yeah. So a little bit about Sayers, founded by Gail Sayers, former Football Hall of Famer in 1984. So we've been in business for over 40 years, specializing in enterprise cybersecurity, cloud, IT infrastructure, networking, storage, compute. And we are partnered with several organizations across the country. From some of our client perspective, St. Jude is one of our partners we support, but they're also a client. and several other important organizations that are out there. So we do believe, as Jason mentioned, giving back to the community and helping these fantastic partners.
Chris, if I could add one comment. Chris Sayers also is a sponsor of other transplant-related organizations, such as, and many of the people watching may have heard of Enduring Hearts, which specifically funds pediatric heart transplant research. So we in the pediatric heart transplant community really appreciate your support, not just for what we're doing here, but in other areas germane to our audience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And so today's goal is really to provide everyone here with some guidance on how to secure your digital world, to discuss how consumer protection and cyber hygiene on a budget is possible, stepping away from that enterprise space where they have dedicated resources that are really interested in this field, and they have dedicated budgets that are allocated to buying services and solutions and stuff. That's not possible with consumers. So we're going to quickly talk through several topics. But if you have additional questions, please reach out. We'll have some contact information at the end there, and hope you all find it beneficial.
And so really where we wanted to start is trying to level set on what really shapes your digital life. And I think that's an ambiguous term that needs some sort of defining before we start talking about how to secure. From an engineering perspective, as we talk about securing organizations, the first thing that we have to understand is, what are we really securing? And so Chris and I spent a lot of time trying to define what a digital life or even a digital footprint would look like. And that would encompass online activities. So really everything you were doing online. Personal data, whether or not you understand what is getting access to different sites, different companies, it is traversing that online footprint, and it is also becoming that ID that you are essentially attempting to secure. Devices is another great one that sometimes gets overlooked. So all of the devices that have network connectivity in your house, we'll go into detail a little bit later. Obviously your phones, PCs, laptops, all those start to encompass that digital footprint. Online accounts, those accounts that you've set up and you have logged out and have never logged back in, that is still part of your digital footprint. That is part of your digital life, whether you are even aware or not. That is still something that can be targeted, and it's something to be aware of. Behavioral data is something that I find fascinating, but it is your tendencies. So applications, sites are able to understand and predict some of what you're going to do at a certain time using analytics and using the data that you're providing them, you're willingly providing them. And so it's understanding what you are providing and how would that identify and again start to shape that digital footprint that you're creating. And lastly, your security practices. That's massive. So how secure are you dictates how secure your digital footprint or your digital life really is. And so as we talk through all of these stages of what we're seeing from an enterprise and consumer side, this is what we really want to drill into as what makes up your digital life. So really what we wanted to start off with is, and we'll start off and end with some very basic but critical guidelines that if there's anything you take away from this session, it would be these pieces. And the first thing is we want to talk about red flags for internet security. So on the web, whether it's family, friends, yourself, what to look out for. And the first piece is urgency and criticality. Most of the attacks that we see on a day-to-day basis are attempting to really manipulate that emotional feeling that you have. So it's trying to instill a sense of urgency. So you may circumvent security policies or even your best interest when they're pushing to get something done in a specific time frame. This needs to be done now. It needs to be done yesterday. If you don't do this within a certain time frame, X, Y, or Z will happen. And so it's always be extra cautious when someone is trying to force you into a timeline that seems unreasonable, it goes without saying that if it's too good to be true, it typically is, especially on the internet. So always be skeptical of deals or any sort of promotions that seem too good to be true. Typically they are. Unusual payment methods. So if someone is asking for gift cards or crypto, typically those are something you want to steer away from. You want to always use some sort of validated payment method and a secure payment method when doing any sort of transactions online. And then like requests for personal information. We've seen some messages that have come across that ask for updated banking numbers, that the bank is reaching out to you asking for updated banking numbers. And so taking a step back and really thinking about that urgency that they need that number or the account will be frozen or so on and so forth. Is this an unusual request? Is this something that the entity should already have? And again, being cognizant, taking a step back and trying to understand really what are they asking for and what is the benefit of me providing that information and making sure all of that aligns before proceeding.
So some general guidelines to be aware of. First one being cognizant. So Jason mentioned that sense of urgency or criticality. So you want to be cognizant in identifying when you see that through general transactions, online communication, social media posts, emails. Use trusted sources. If you're seeing something, validate what you're seeing. Who is the source? Where did it come from? Can it be trusted? So that's something that's going to be a kind of a theme throughout here is being cognizant, being aware of what's actually happening and taking note of, your security kind of conscious coming up and saying, question what's occurring. Make sure that you're using secure websites like HTTPS. It's kind of anywhere, it's everywhere. It can be used by the adversary, so there's malicious attackers, but it's going to make you put into a better position. So like if you do banking online, that's going to be that HTTPS communication. It's going to encrypt that traffic. It's going to not let praying eyes see it. The other kind of general guideline is use very strong authentication, like multi-factor authentication. Many of the applications that are out there in the online solutions allow you to have another level of authentication beyond just a username and a password. There are some multi-factor authentication solutions more secure than others. We won't go into depth in that for that in this presentation. Like phone factor through SMS messaging, probably not a great method, but definitely going to be more secure than not doing it. But there's other things like Google authenticators and such that would be really good and beneficial to leverage. QR codes, very awesome technology, great innovator. Since COVID, we've kind of seen these at restaurants. You scan them and the menu pops up. Question, has someone put another QR code over an existing QR code? Can the QR location be trusted? Is it a billboard? Is it someone that just posted something somewhere? These are being used in nefarious ways. So you want to be cognizant of that and be careful when clicking on QR codes. And probably steer clear, maybe just go to the website directly if needed. Find a risk tolerance that's right for you. So we all have different risk tolerances. What might be right for me might not be right for somebody else. What your budget might be different than somebody else. But just being cognizant, and when you're making those decisions, figure out what's the best decision at this point in time, and what's right for me and my family, and how can we move forward. Avoid defaults. So whenever you get a new system, a new phone, a new computer, a new Wi-Fi access point, change the defaults. Typically, it's going to be just passwords. Sometimes you can change your username and password. Sometimes you get to create the first account of username and password in the solution, and highly recommend to do that. And then and do that on anything and everything that you can create an account on that you access. And then finally, for this general guidelines, update and patch often. The updates are not just for new features, new functionality, which is great. Oftentimes, it's there for security patches, for vulnerabilities that exist that need to be resolved. And so definitely take a look at your phones, your computers, your TVs, all your devices that you haven't deployed in your home. Make sure you're kind of getting on a cadence to go through and check for updates. Very important to do. And then protecting your information. So I know a lot of you are very familiar with PHI and PII and what that stands for, but how do we protect that information? And this is what the adversaries, those malicious actors, are after, is information. And a matter of fact, when you take a look at healthcare records, and I've seen numbers all across the board, but one thing that stands out is healthcare records are at the highest value. And then when you kind of compare that to social security numbers, credit card numbers, and other data that might be out there, they're significantly less. There's a reason why healthcare information is so highly rated. But you want to protect this information for privacy reasons, for fraud, for financial protections, but identity theft is a big one. The healthcare records have so much information in it, they can take your identity and then go open additional credit card information, buy phones, whatever it is. And a great stat down here on the bottom is 38 to 48% of victims find out about identity theft within 3 months of it happening. That's a significant amount of time to cause significant damage. So the thing is if someone has compromised your information and they have it, the way to stop that is by freezing your credit. And you can do that proactively right now without ever having identity problems in the past. This is going to protect you proactively for future disruptions. So these three credit agencies are the primary ones: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Go to their websites directly. There's probably going to be something right on the homepage to freeze your credit. It's free. It's very easy to do. It does not take a lot of time. And the thing is the only time that that's going to come up where you need to go back in there and make some changes is when you buy a home, buy a car, open a credit card, which are things that don't occur often. But the adversaries' activities, that's occurring frequently. So it's easy to do. Highly recommend you do that for all members of the family. And then finally, this right to be forgotten. Definitely use that. If you've signed up for online accounts, and I'm sure there's a lot of accounts that you use, if you're no longer using those, use that right to be forgotten. It's not a US law at this point in time. It is in other countries, but it is something that US companies are allowing their clients to use and benefit from. So definitely do that. That way your information potentially can be destroyed, no longer there. If there is a breach for that application in the future, you're going to be protected.
So as we start talking about protecting your information, we really want to start talking about that initial access to the information. And that typically is a username, some sort of authentication mechanism. So two-factor, SMS, something along those lines. And really, when I have this conversation with friends and family, not that often, but I love talking about it, and probably spend another half an hour talking about this. It is password management is key. If there's one thing that I could recommend, it would be understanding password security and implementing a process that not only reduces the friction of handling passwords, but also increases the security is a force multiplier. And so what I think really hits that home at that point is how long it takes to crack a password. And so looking at a 12-character password, which most people, it's a lengthy password. And if you utilize a password that only consists of numbers, it takes a single second for someone to crack that password. So now if we start looking at lowercase letters, it takes 14 hours. So it starts to exponentially get higher and higher. Now we do upper and lowercase letters and it goes to 6 years. Numbers, upper and lowercase, goes to 53 years to crack that password at our current capacity. Then if we utilize everything we can, so numbers, upper and lowercase, and symbols, that jumps drastically to 226 years. And so I think it's important that as we talk about manufacturing passwords and creating passwords, doing something simple like adding uppercase, lowercase symbols in alternating numbers exponentially increases your security and your ability to refrain from a password being cracked. Now, if it is released in a data breach, that's a different story, and we'll talk about that. But at the same time, that initial access is harder to gain if someone is trying to break into one of your accounts. So really what we're looking at in the industry is a passphrase. And that's the idea of something like the passwords listed above that are complicated and hard to remember. So a secure way of handling passwords is to create a memorable passphrase that's lengthy and it includes the numbers, upper, lowercase, and symbols. It's hard to guess, but it's memorable for you. And so I created this password just as an example. Say I'm from Chicago. We're doing a friend's trip down to Florida in 2025. So I created a password that's Illinois to Florida with an underscore with friends 25. So it's something that's memorable for me, but it also is increasing my security. And then as we go further, I start breaking into password management. And Chris, if you could advance the slide for me, talking about password managers. And again, I will shout this from the rooftops. Family and friends are probably sick of hearing me talk about it at this point, but password managers are one of the best things you can do when implemented appropriately to maintain your security posture as a consumer. So what I'm talking about there is not only does it reduce friction because it can automatically input your password into applications or websites, you'll use that strong passphrase, something that's memorable but lengthy and secure, to now really secure your password manager, and then let the password manager do the hard work of generating the passwords that you saw on the previous slide and inject them into the site of the application when needed. And the nice thing about that is not only if you were to go to a new device or if you were to upgrade your phone or your laptop, all you do is download that password manager to whatever that new device is, plug in your master password, and you have access to all of the original passwords within that password manager. So if there's a breach, that you get a notification, such as the Change Healthcare one, but that's not, I guess, technically applicable in the password piece here. But if you get a notification of a breach, all you do is rotate that password in your password manager, and none of the other passwords are affected because you're using unique passwords at each application. And so these breaches become less and less of an area of impact that you have to be concerned about. Now, this is Chris and I's take on what we recommend. We're not partnered with any of these solutions. These are just personal recommendations. I love Bitwarden, 1Password. LastPass is very popular. They have been breached multiple times since 2015, I believe. And so it's one that I would steer clear of just because of the popularity. It is targeted more frequently. And so that's a concern that you have to understand is sometimes the most popular solutions, and a lot of times the most popular solutions are a target. And so we want to make sure that we're mitigating some of that risk by looking at other alternative options if we're seeing in the news that LastPass keeps coming out. Some of the unique features of the password managers as well is as you utilize these passwords in a site, it can automatically notify you that your address or your password has been leaked via a breach. So you should automatically rotate your credentials. Please don't put your passwords desktop. We see it. not thrilled, but it comes from a good place, but there's just a better way to do it. Have strong authentication with each application. And so that goes back to your risk tolerance. So the security that I put behind my banking account versus my YouTube account would be completely different. And so understanding your risk tolerance, but still MFA in place can reduce those attacks significantly, that even if your password gets breached and released and people are just, they have a list of usernames and passwords and they're just going down the list and trying to log in and see what works, that is that last line of defense, that you get a notification that there is an unknown device that's attempting to connect to, say, your Bank of America. That is that last line of defense. And so if you can put that at every application, you are automatically increasing your security posture there. There's a site, it's haveibeenpwned.com. Highly recommend it. It's free. You can enter in your email address and see what breaches that email is associated with. And so all of a sudden, if you're starting to get malicious logins or foreign logins from a different country or a different time zone or so on and so forth, you can actually go back and look at what was that originating cause. But again, if you're using different passwords for all of your applications, then it's very easy to tie back to where that breach occurred from and where those credentials were leaked.
So going on to social media, this is a very important point of protecting your information, because this is where a lot of information is exposed. So one area that the adversaries will use is open source intelligence, OSINT. And this is what information is publicly available out there that is accessible to anyone to get. So why should you care about these open source intelligence? There's actually tools that can help the adversary automate the research of individuals. They can start off with an email address, a name, a phone number, and that would go out there, dynamically gather information and stitch it together and come out with more information. So the more information you're providing out there, the more information will be readily available for the adversaries. But there are things that you can do to protect yourself and limit that exposure. So in some of these hosting considerations, think about the timing. Excuse me, if your family's on a vacation, for example, and you're posting that, hey, your whole family is out in the Caribbean islands, what you're doing is advertising that your home is now vacant and potentially up for no one, potentially having eyes on it. So timing is very important. Potentially post after you get back saying, hey, just got back from the Caribbean with the family, post some pictures, all good. Think about what information you're going to be posting. So we talked about the information like in the timing section, but how much information does your audience really need? If it's too much information, TMI, maybe hold some of that back. Don't share that. Think about the pictures and videos that you're posting and what potentially can be behind those. If you take a picture of your office and you do have sticky notes written down with username and passwords, could that expose on the internet? If you have a picture of maybe certain types of rooms in your home, that might expose some vulnerability points that the adversary is looking for. Also take a look into, what type of personal information, family information, employment status information is out there, because they're going to use that to build campaigns to target you and come after you with putting like a simple social engineering technique, a phishing technique, and go off of that urgency and criticality message to you. So that's where you need to be cognizant and think, did I post something? Why does this sound all familiar and friendly? It might be a campaign that was targeted based upon what you posted up there. There's different types of groups you can post to. Are you trying to be like a social media influencer and build your profile and followers? That's one thing. If you're not, most people probably aren't, then probably don't post your postings in a public setting. do it in a private setting, maybe create friend groups. And then that way, if you go on vacation, you want people to kind of experience that vacation alongside you, you have a trusted friend group that you're posting to. It's not going to be out to the public, which is a good recommendations. But also continuously review your friends. You're probably getting a lot of friend recommendations, friend requests, but some of those are not going to be valid. I mean, I'm friends with social media with both my parents, but I'm getting friend requests from my parents. Same picture profile, same everything. It's obviously fraudulent. But if you ever have questions, go out of band, reach out to your parents and say, is this you sending me a friend request? Because we're already friends. And they're probably going to say, no, that's not me. So you can probably report that profile. But whenever you're posting anything on social media and any application that's out there, assume the content is never deleted. Once you post it out there, that is out there forever. So make sure, like a tattoo or something like that, it's permanent. You don't want it to go away. It's fine being exposed out there. Snapchat, where with those temporary videos, they still stay. They don't always go away. So be very careful in that. Moving on to some additional social media guidelines, review your profile itself. So take a look at what information have you exposed on your profile. Do you have any private information, your cell phone, your address, or anything right there in your public profile that you may want to suppress or take away? Probably not necessarily needed out there. Browse the security settings of your applications on your social media settings and enable those security features. They're there for a reason. And oftentimes you're only forced to use it when maybe an application says you must enable MFA or something. But I would say proactively just go there occasionally, read, kind of scroll through them, see what settings are there. And again, based upon your tolerance, see what you can enable and benefit from. And then finally, there is be cautious of the GoFundMe and similar organizations out there. They're obviously out there for a good cause, doing a lot of good things, but there's also many of them out there that are nefarious. GoFundMe is highly recognized. When you're looking at potentially raising funds for your family, for medical treatment, whatever it may be, there are several organizations out there that can help. GoFundMe might be the right one, but again, you risk tolerance and what makes sense for your circumstance and situation. Take a look at some of the other ones that are out there. So do that research. And I know there's several that our partners on the call have recommended and have worked with that might be a better option.
I wanted to touch on email guidelines. I think that affects every one of us. And go through some basics that I like to cover, just starting that conversation around email security. And not to dissuade anyone, but email is inherently not secure. It's something that we're aware of, and there's some mitigations in place to try to secure it to the best of our ability. But at the end of the day, it was not built on being secure. And so things like lack of encryption, which it goes down a different conversation, but a lot of times mail is sent in plain text. So what that means is if you're at a coffee shop and someone is listening to the network traffic pass by and you send an email that for some reason say has your social security number in it, that would be visible to someone that is snooping around the network. So it's something to be cognizant of. And again, hitting the main points of this talk is be cognizant of what you're sending. Spoofing and phishing, I don't think that really needs a whole lot of description because we see it every day, not only from a personal standpoint in my Gmail, but also from an enterprise standpoint. It's very easy to spoof. And going back to the OSINT piece, that is a tactic that's being used. It takes less and less time, and we're going to touch on AI in a couple slides here, but it takes less and less time for someone to craft an email that is very believable based off of what they can discover from simply Googling your name and going down a couple links and understanding. And so understanding that we're not seeing as many of these Nigerian prince emails as often anymore as more sophisticated attacks against even just a consumer. So being aware and being vigilant and cognizant that you should not trust everything that comes in initially, but you need to do your own verification. And it goes back to that criticality and urgency that if you're getting an email that is something urgent that needs to be taken care of right away, click this link to take care of it. You need to take a step back and understand really what is going on here. Is this something that is expected? Is it something that is out of the blue and doesn't make sense? Attachments, again, I don't think I need to go too far in depth here, but most of the attacks that we're seeing from an enterprise side is something embedded into an attachment in and of itself. And so if you get an email from an unknown sender that has an attachment in it that you're not familiar with, it's not the time to test it out and see. It's not the time to see, well, maybe it is something important. Maybe, and that's out of band communication to what Chris was saying. If I get an email from my mom that has an invoice on it, well, I am going to reach out to her out of band. So think a phone call, a text, whatever it may be, and really understand, is that something that is malicious? Is that something that she did? Is it an accident? And try to start piecing it all together before I take that instant action of clicking and then having to deal with a cleanup later. Inadequate sender verification. And so that goes back to that spoofing piece. So really, it is not difficult to spoof a lot of these major vendors, and there's protocols in place and they're getting better and better. But when you build on something that is inherently insecure, it's difficult and it takes time. And so you want to be cautious of everything, no matter if it's coming from, and it looks like it's coming from, say, Disney Plus or Hulu, whatever it may be. You need to be careful and understand that, is this something I'm expecting? And if not, is this something that feels off? We have this really natural, innate ability to have that, is it off feeling. Something just doesn't feel right. And the majority of the time, you should trust your gut that if it really doesn't feel right, it's probably not. So really pay attention to that feeling as you're looking through these urgency-based emails. There are some mail solution providers that can disable auto downloading of images and attachments. So just quick Google search on whatever you're using. Off the top of my head, I don't hold me to it, but I believe Gmail can disable downloading images, but not attachments. And then I want to say Exchange or Office is able to do both, but double check me. Don't take it as a fact. Quick Google search, and that's something that can stop the attack before it even begins. Nearly 85% of all email traffic is spam. I think that's a stat that really doesn't need any more discussion. We're quite familiar with that. But what's important is 33% of the total spam volume is healthcare related. And so as these data breaches occur more and more frequently, it is something that you need to pay closer and closer attention to and understand that a large volume of that spam is coming from the healthcare sector. A spam source is the United States. It makes sense from a protocol standpoint. Something coming in from Gmail is somewhat trusted. And so we see a lot of the times that a lot of that spam messages that make it through do come from like a Hotmail or Gmail or Yahoo account. And so be cautious that even though it says that it's from Bank of America Billings, the email address may actually be jason123@gmail.com. And so those don't line up. And so it's taking that extra second to say, well, I see it's from this title, but the email address is saying otherwise. Something doesn't feel right here. And lastly, from Proofpoint, fantastic email security provider, 90% of phishing attacks actually require human interaction. And so if we really start to train the people around us, family, friends, all of that, we can start to really stop those attacks before it even begins.
Yeah, so deep fakes, this was briefly mentioned before, but this is something where artificial intelligence is becoming more mainstream and accessible by the adversaries to use and leverage for bad. So there's a lot of good that comes from artificial intelligence, but there's also with that can be used for bad. But deepfakes is something where it's a fake audible visual or message that was generated by AI that can look like it's something real. Whether it's a CEO, maybe your child, your grandmother. And the more information, the more pictures and videos that they have access to online, the more they can put into the AI machine and generate something else down the road. If they have video, audible, they can actually put it all together and make a completely realistic looking message, and that's scary, right? But again, with shifting that sense of urgency, criticality, that comes from these deep fakes of, hey, this is someone important in your family. I need you to do this. I need you to do this immediately. This is super important. And people say, well, it looks like you, it sounds like you, it must be you, and you're asking me to do something. I'll do it. But again, be cognizant of that, and then maybe put them on hold, put them on mute, see if you can't get another line, go out of band and give that person a call directly and see if it's actually true. So that out of band thing, constantly think, do I need to go out of band and verify that? If you can't get a hold of that person, which is odd because you're just supposedly talking to them or they sent you a message, find someone else close to that person out of band and contact them as well. So how do you secure your family from being tricked? Potentially come up with a family password or a passphrase that you can share that only you know about. So when this urgent message comes up, say, great, give me the password, give me the family passphrase, and then I'll know it's you. And don't share that with anybody. And then again, the out of band validation. There are several AI tools that are out there that can look for deep fakes. So if you're questioning things, there's one that we listed here, can't verify it, something that some of our engineers have used in the past. There's several out there, but just be cognizant. The examples on the right-hand side have been generated by AI and did a phenomenal job. So we're going to see more of that coming soon. Chat GPT, something that was all the hype and still is making a lot of noise out there. OpenAI doing a phenomenal job. And they keep coming out with new iterations, with new capabilities. But know this, information that you submit to Chat GPT is in the public domain. That is not private. If you don't have like a personal account, if you don't have an enterprise account, they're not protecting that data, keeping it separate from everything else. That will be submitted to the public. And you don't want that. So definitely, when you think about what information am I submitting, is it PHI, PII, addresses, social security numbers, email, whatever it may be, phone numbers? Should I do that? Probably not. Do not upload that content. I hear stories about people taking entire conversations from meetings or doctors or whatever it may be, uploading it out there and expecting this magic to happen. But the thing is now you've exposed that data and you don't want to do that. So something recently that came out from ChatGPT is these memories. And so I know there's a lot of buzz around the concern where it gives you the option to clear the memories. And it's basically so every time you engage with ChatGPT, it can pull from prior memories of conversations that you have and potentially use that data in that response. But obviously, the more that they have, it may help in future conversations with ChatGPT, but it's also, are they truly deleting it? And then this is just one example. There's several applications out there that seem really cool, and the more I submit, the more engaging it can be. But again, how necessary is that? What's that risk tolerance? But definitely keep sensitive information sensitive. So as we go into the home security tips, so what can you do in your homes in like the consumer world where you don't have the budgets and the dedicated resources and an IT staff? So here are the things. Use a network-based hardware firewall. Very important. Don't rely on the ISP to give you a device, or you rent a device or go buy your own device and connect to the ISP and think that that's going to secure everything on your network. I would use another device, and there's several out there. We haven't gone through and evaluated all these different devices, but there's several out there. Maybe go to Best Buy, talk to them, and find some solutions. They're pretty reasonable as well. In addition to a network-based hardware firewall, we recommend using endpoint security, whether on your laptop, your desktop, your mobile devices. Definitely look at antivirus, firewalls, encryption, web filtering. Some of these capabilities are going to be built into the operating system, whether it's Windows or Macintosh. If it's built in, leverage those features. You can also go out there and buy some applications. One formerly owned by Disney Circle is called Aura, and looks like to be a nice solution. Can't validate it, but it's got a lot of capabilities, especially for children that you want to protect online. Data protection, protect that PHI and PII information. That's going to help out with some of these tools. They're fairly reasonably priced. The next thing is change the defaults. We mentioned this earlier as well, but this is very important on everything that you own. You have a new device that comes in, Amazon device or Google device, a TV, whatever it may be, your refrigerator, a toaster oven, washer machine. Change the username, the passwords, especially on your printers. I can tell you that whenever I do a walk around the neighborhood, I can bring up my phone. I can see printer defaults on their advertising of a wireless network to connect to them. I see these printers all the time. They're not been configured in a proper way, and that type of stuff needs to be disabled. Wi-Fi. So if you're going to have internet, chances are you're going to have Wi-Fi. You want to walk all over your house, connect your refrigerators and toasters without having cables plugged to them, which is great. That Wi-Fi is going to bleed. That signal is going to bleed outside your home. So be cognizant of that. So being that signal is bleeding outside your home, what do you have connected to it? Change those defaults, update and patch them often because of the insecurities on them. They're discovering vulnerabilities, they're providing patches, do those updates. Use encryption on your Wi-Fi. That way someone out in the street, your neighbors, can't ease in on your conversations. Create a guest network. A lot of the home Wi-Fi vendors out there will allow you to create a guest network that's going to segment them from the other users. The nice thing is that they can't see your printers, they can't see your TVs and other components, and potentially put those TVs and toaster ovens on the guest network, not your home network. And that's a good thing as well, is to segment where possible. Again, your risk tolerance, your level of knowledge on this equipment, and it depends on the vendor what type of segmentation you can do. But there's several good ones out there. And then supportability. How old is your phone, your desktop, your laptop, your solutions that you have connected to the internet? Are they still receiving updates and patches? If they're too old, they stop supporting them. When they stop supporting them, they're not going to get software updates to patch those vulnerabilities. That's going to potentially expose that device and the network it's connected to and the users behind those devices to potential threats. And we don't want that. So potentially, if it's that old from an age perspective, where it's no longer getting updates, consider updating to a newer solution. And so we want to update the hardware, the operating systems, the software and applications that reside on them as well.
Pointing to some more home security tips, to talk about cell phones for a second. It's part of our day-to-day life. And so making sure that we're securing this small portable device that holds a lot of our critical information is of the utmost importance. And one of those things is connecting to trusted networks. When I say trusted networks, is as you go, airport is a great example. If you go to connect to Wi-Fi in an airport, you will see a mass amount of different networks you can connect to. The idea is that you shouldn't always connect to the first one that's open and available. You should make sure that you are trusting the network that you are connecting to. There's a myriad of reasons of why, but at the end of the day, it's making sure that the traffic that is passing into that network is trusted and it's verified, that someone's not snooping around and being nefarious. Do you need to, is it an option to stay on cellular? That just provides that little layer of security. Sometimes that's not an option. And so going along that point, using a VPN when you're connecting to maybe a untrusted network or something that it's not a home, it's not a work network, it's at a Starbucks or a McDonald's, maybe something like that, using a VPN can be a great extra layer of security. I'll touch on the VPN piece in a second, but it is an option to, again, layer that security in. App necessity, that is near and dear to my heart. Apps try to get all the information off a phone that they're able to. And so it's understanding, is this app necessary to be installed on my phone? And it's something that I think I drive my wife crazy talking about it, but are you reviewing what you have installed on your device? Do you need that app from 3 years ago that is just sitting there and you haven't logged in, that is still pulling data? And so a couple of examples that I like to call out, not that there are specific apps, but just getting an understanding of how this data sharing goes, is if you have a weather app and it is pulling your location data to provide you up-to-date weather. Now, it is not only pulling location data while you are specifically looking at the weather in your area, it is constantly pulling location data. And what they can do is they can sell that data to third-party companies that use that data analytics to start to create that behavioral footprint that becomes you. And that is something that, if you need to do it, by all means, go for it. But if it's not necessary, then that's something that you shouldn't have installed on your phone. Shopping apps that utilize Wi-Fi information. So say, again, using my Starbucks or McDonald's example, it sees that I'm connecting to the guest network of a McDonald's 3-4 times a week. It may start to sell that data to push McDonald's advertisements to me because it knows I go there frequently, and that they can get me to go there when they push a 50% Big Mac coupon or whatever it may be. And so it's understanding how, while on your phone they look like they're not connected, that your Facebook app isn't connected to your YouTube app or whatever it may be, but in reality they're all pulling as much data as they reasonably can to really give you a fingerprint, to identify you as an individual. And going back to my VPN piece, if you download a free VPN, it may be selling your browser information, what you're doing on the web as you're connected to that VPN. So you are adding in that layer of security on an untrusted Wi-Fi network, but it may know that you're going to target.com 4 times in a day looking at whatever. It doesn't make a difference. And so it can sell that data to companies that then start to fingerprint you and provide that almost intrusive level of marketing. And that's concerning to me. Using your own power cords and chargers is a big one. Those charging stations scare me a lot. If you look at the picture that I have on the right there, that is Hack5's OMG cable that they use for penetration testing to test companies when they go in. And what it has is, it has a module that it's an implant that is actually on a charging cable. So the cable looks completely normal, like a standard Apple cable or an iPhone cable. But what it can do is it can actually inject commands if it's plugged into a computer or phone, or can record keystrokes. And then someone can go back and grab that cable and they have your whole history. Going into VPNs for a quick second, highly recommend, again, this is our research, Proton VPN, NordVPN. And if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. And that's something that I take to heart, and probably a little bit too much to heart, but it is something worthwhile to think about. Is, if I'm not paying for a service that is providing value, then where are they getting their money from? Typically it's in some way selling or using your data. And lastly, not click on links. So if you get an urgent email and it says update your password on your banking account, click here to do it. Go to the bank off your browser first. Don't click the link and then enter in your password. That's a massive way we see compromises happen.
So now we go into IoT, IOMT, CPS. That's Internet of Things, Internet of Medical Things, Cyber Physical Security. There's a lot more acronyms out there, a lot more names, but basically the devices that are connecting to the internet that can do multitude of different things. This we can spend hours on. We're not going to, but it's important because a lot of the medical devices are Internet of Medical Things. You have all these different technology components that you wear and that's connected to you, that are all connected to the internet or to a network providing telemetry information. So there's a lot of considerations with those. You want to segment them. You want to be cognizant of what network they're connecting to. If you do have a family member that has a medical device at home that needs a plug in, can that leverage a cellular network, like Jason mentioned previously, to where it's not using your network and being compromised by surrounding devices? Can your home network maybe be segmented to where that could be separated and not be disrupted? But again, never trust, always verify those devices. Do you really need all those different devices to be talking to the internet? And then potentially use that as a shopping decision if you're looking for cameras or doorbells, whatever it may be, is maybe go with a name that you recognize. Might be a little bit more money than a name you don't recognize that might potentially expose PII and other information and cause disruption and cost you more in the long run. So be cognizant of that. But again, with IoT devices, these systems, sometimes they don't update. If they do have the ability to update, make sure you're looking and verifying that they're getting their updates and patches, and just be cognizant of this area. And then finally, we have some key takeaways. So out of everything we've talked about in this presentation, what are some of those key components? And number one is change your default passwords on all the new devices, laptops, workstations, computers, phones, IoT, IOMT devices, as you're able to. Secure your passwords, use strong passwords, and use a password management solution. Very important for several reasons that Jason went through. Enable MFA where possible. So that secure authentication, multi-factor authentication, which is doing some out-of-band components, very important. That way, if your password does get compromised, MFA is actually not something that can be shared. That is actually a one-time use component of the authentication, which is the security portion of it. Be cognizant. Don't let urgency dictate your decisions. Always be aware and be the security conscious of why is what's happening. Should I, maybe be thinking into this a little bit more? Should I caution against this? Do I need to contact someone out of band and ask them about this? Secure your devices, secure your networks, patch and update often, leverage a firewall, leverage endpoint security solutions like antivirus and other technology. But that is it for our presentation. I want to thank you all for your time. I know this was a quick hit of several different topics over a short amount of time. If anyone has any questions, wants to go into anything in more depth, happy to have those discussions with you.
Thank you to our presenters. We're going to do a quick Q&A. We only have a couple of moments because we're over time, and I really appreciate everybody staying with us. But I'm just going to address two questions that were asked, and I hope everybody can see our screen here. If you have any desire to reach out to transplant families, you can do so using the contact information that you see. Otherwise, and then Trio Philadelphia is at triophiladelphia.org, and Chris already gave his information for Sayers. One question was asked, could you define right to be forgotten?
Yeah. So the right to be forgotten is your ability to go to an organization and ask them to delete your information from their application, from their database. So as it was mentioned in the chat, it looks like some states are considering this to be in law. There are other countries that already have this enacted so that you have consumer protection. There's a lot of information out there. These other countries and organizations are sensitive to the fact that you want your information to be private. Some organizations have too much information. If you're concerned about it, you go to those organizations and ask them, request that your information use your right to be forgotten, and so that they can delete your information. I think like Google and Facebook and several others have the ability to go in there. You'll remove your account and information, and it will be there. It might be called something else, but right to be forgotten is actually a known phrase with several solutions that are out there.
And then the second part is really just not so much a question as much as more of a statement. There's the larger topic. You touched on one, which is Internet of Medical Things. That kind of dovetails with another question, which is securely handling medical data from your provider, and that is a whole different ball of wax. It's related, but it's worthy of its own event itself, and that's something that we would consider possibly with subject matter experts in that arena. So I really appreciate our presenters, Jason and Chris from Sayers, and to Kevin Dunn from Sayers for arranging this for us. This video will be posted on the YouTube channel for Transplant Families and made available on the websites for Trio Philadelphia and Transplant Families. I really appreciate everybody hanging out a little late, especially on a late afternoon, and I appreciate every time. Thank you very much.